Hi everyone. So I've been making these time-lapse videos a lot, and I thought, I just sit really quietly while I make them, and I'm really focused, and all these things go through my head while I'm working, and I thought maybe I'd make a normal time one. And I borrowed a friend's GoPro just to try this out. So it'd be really interesting to hear feedback. So I'm basically just going to have you be with me in the studio for about an hour, maybe. And I'm going to talk aloud my thought process while I'm working. And yeah, so just if you have questions or even comments, just like cool or whatever, that'd be great. So as usual, I'm working on like a lot of pieces simultaneously, so I kind of switch between things while I'm working. I have this piece here, which is kind of I've done a composition similar to this on white paper a lot, and this is the first time I'm doing it on black, so it's going to be a little different. And I've already decided that the main difference is in the white portion here that I've created. I'm not gonna just do simple black, like a couple lines. I'm gonna do the whole line segmenting, but in black. Another thing that happened is, and you probably can't see it in the video, but the white, for whatever reason, when it dries a little warm, like almost pinkish. So I'm gonna try mixing another white right now. I'm going to use the white from my super fancy whole bean set, and I'm going to use like a totally new clean palette. Well, not a clean palette, but clean cell of a palette. And because I really want this white to be white. So when I mix my gouaches, I typically will mix the straight from the tube. I add 1 drop of glycerin because I saw in a video once that it helps it to reconstitute more easily if you want to use it again. And since gouache paint isn't free, I like to be able to reuse it rather than I used to just, after every time I painted in gouache, I would clean my palettes and start from scratch the next time, which also, I mean, it's kind of a luxury to be able to do that, and I kind of wish I could, because reconstituting can be difficult. You get like you get little not fully reconstituted flakes sometimes in your mix, and then it shows up on in the painting. So ideally, either I'd like to master reconstituting, or I wish I just could not care about spending money on paint and use fresh paint every time. It's also just really wasteful from a, that perspective, an ecological point of view, I guess. All right, so this is going to be really fast. I'm just going to paint over this field. It's in addition to being like just a little pink, it's also not quite as smooth from like a brush stroke standpoint as I'd like. So hopefully this will be the last coat. So one of the most important things in working with gouache is getting the right consistency. I already feel like I maybe have added a little bit too much water to this. Although, I don't know, we'll see. I have some REM playing in the background. I'm just letting music play. I think that, you know, I'm not supposed to, like, if I'm gonna publish this on somewhere, like on YouTube or something, you're not supposed to have like copyrighted music. But I listen to music when I work, so I don't know what I'm gonna do if I have to stop doing that. It's really kind of a strange experience to talk your thoughts out loud nonstop. It's kind of feels like I'm talking to myself, but I'm hopefully having some audience listen. So, in addition to just being an experiment with creating video, this video is kind of part of my grand plan to possibly create something called a Patreon. If you haven't heard of it, Patreon is a little bit like Kickstarter for artists, but rather than having like a single project, it's more of an ongoing subscription support kind of thing, where you can subscribe to an artist and they will give you content or access to other things in return for like a monthly donation. And you know, being here in China, I'm not able to work. I mean, unless I like find a job and then get a work visa and all that stuff. And I've really appreciated having the time to work on art, so I'm not really looking for a job. But it would be nice to have a little bit more income. So what I'm hoping to do is maybe start a Patreon page, which will mostly, I'm just hoping, allow me to do things like buy more art supplies, maybe invest in a studio so I can work on larger pieces, things like that. So again, if you take any time to comment, if you think like you might be interested in becoming a patron of mine, where even if you were to think, oh yeah, I would send you $1 a month, that kind of feedback will help me to make a decision about that. Because honestly, I mean, there are some people who really seem to engage with my work, and I really appreciate hearing from those people, and I would like to sort of formalize that interaction rather than occasional comments on Instagram. I'd like to really create a dialogue with some people and really, you know, hear some in-depth thoughts of what people think about my work, and you know, if they see potential for how I could alter what I'm doing, or even, you know, their own ideas about how they interpret my work. I would really appreciate creating that sort of space for interaction with people. Alright, this is just about done. So I'm going to put it to the side. piece. So this table back here is also like where I eat breakfast. So one time I put a piece of art there and it got ruined because there was some grease on the table. So it's another pitfall of working in your own home. So here's another piece I'm working on. I recently bought this tape, which I've never used before, and it allows me to create, since I work with so much straight lines, it's kind of like a really convenient thing for me. And I was really nervous that it would tear at the paper and stuff like that, but it comes off really easily. So I'm just creating this piece that's sort of a reaction to a woman who bought a couple of my pieces recently saw in my archive some pieces with this kind of construction, and she's like, oh, I really like those, if you ever make more of those. So of course I'm making one, hoping that she'll want to buy it. So the challenge with these is, number one, if you don't get the tape just right, it could still bleed outside of the line, which in some ways kind of looks cool, but it could look not intentional, and you don't want to look like you're doing something by accident. Another reason why, I've sort of always hesitated about using this stuff is it is a little, again, wasteful. You're like just using several pieces of tape for a single artwork. But, I don't know. I guess I have to come to terms with that. Is this right? Oh, there it goes. Sometimes I forget what I'm doing. So you want to just make sure that the seal's nice and strong. And the same thing goes with watercolor. Reconstituting it, sometimes it fights you, and you get all this, like, these particulates in it, and there's a little bit of grain when you apply the paint. And with this, what I'm doing is I'm creating a wash, and I kind of ideally would like the wash to be the same consistency, the same transparency every time. But that's next to impossible, especially if you work on it over days, because you can't monitor the exact amount of ratio of water to paint. So I kind of go by eye. When this dries out overnight, it leaves like a residue, and I kind of add water until the residue, it looks about the same. It fills in the footprint. So again, with a wash, what I usually do is first I go over it with just water, so that when I add the paint, it'll just kind of flow evenly over the whole thing. I actually don't want quite that much. I don't know if you could hear that, but someone just rode by on a bike, probably, with a loudspeaker just saying things over and over in Chinese. And it's really common here for vendors to just ride through like a knife sharpener guy or a vegetable seller, or I think there's like someone who's a exterminator. But I don't really ever understand what they're saying. There's every night there's two guys that just walk through, and one of them carries a bell and the other one carries this loudspeaker, and I think it's just like, you know, keep the alleys clean or something. But it's quaint, but it's also really annoying because we live right on the ground floor, so you know, we're trying to watch TV or something and there's just someone going by with the bell, and it kind of reminds me of Game of Thrones, the Shame Lady. Alright, what else do I have? So I have this piece which I've been trying to decide if I'm taking it to another place or not. Maybe today's the day I decide that, because I don't know. Like, you know, if I had this ongoing conversation, I would like probably ask people literally. I feel like I could either do one of two things. I could just stop and say it's finished, or as I've done here where I've completed the permutation on this one, I could do that for all of the other ones. It's a lot more work for me to do that, so that's one thing. I mean, not that I mean, I don't mind working, but it has to make sense. It has to make the piece work. It's just like, you know, there's so much concentration of stuff here that I feel like this side's heavy and this side's light, but then I really like this part here, and because this is light, it kind of stands out more. Although if this was really dense, it would probably still stand out. I don't know, I've just been leaning more and more to completing it, so maybe that's just what I'll do. I could start that. Probably would not finish that today. It takes kind of a long time. But I don't really have anything else going on, so I think I'll do it. So this is the part where it gets really exciting. No, I'm just kidding. But you could see, instead of fast motion, you could see this happen in regular speed, and how long this actually takes me. And maybe sort of see what I see when I do it. So again, I don't know how well you could hear the music. I'm hoping it's just like slightly in the background and not too strong, but you could hear it enough to recognize it. I think this is like big bands of the 20s or 30s or something like that. And when I listen to music, I tend to listen to my entire library on shuffle, and I think that frustrates a lot of people, but for me, I like it. I have probably, I don't even know now, maybe, I think more than 20,000 songs on in my iTunes library. And sometimes I listen to albums, or sometimes I listen to playlists. But I really enjoy the surprise of hearing things in shuffle. Um, Music is like a memory trigger for me, and I feel like I have like a close emotional relationship with almost all the music in my library, whether it's going to a concert or even just like where I bought the CD or when. Um, so, because also all of these in my library, nearly every track in my library is ripped from a CD. It's not like I bought it on iTunes or, you know, torrented it from Napster or wherever. Um, I had a huge CD collection when CDs were still a thing. I still have them. They're just in storage for the most part, which may come in handy if there's ever like a apocalypse and computers don't work anymore. I could also consider doing something like this. Like I really like that this particular little permutation guy right here. I like how it's looking just by doing a single point to every other point. It might just give it the depth that I'm looking for without having to do the whole thing. And then as one of the other things I was considering is doing a different treatment on each one of them so that they're distinct from one another. Because this was already dark, the paint, it almost doesn't look any different visually. The density doesn't really change much. I'm just gonna keep going. So I've gotten in the habit of doing it this way, where I go from one point to the next. There's two reasons for that. Being systematic, for example, it's easy to know where I left off. But also, you know, this concentration point where the point is, it creates a sort of like a wet spot in a way with the ink. Although the microns dry super fast, some of the other media I use to make the permutations do not dry as fast. So this way the ruler isn't going over the spots that I'm making, the lines that I'm making. So it's giving them a chance to dry. Again, it's not really an issue with micron, but it's just a good habit to be in regardless of what medium I'm working in. And it requires the least amount of ruler moving. And this is such a repetitive motion job that any you know, adjustments I can make to my movements are easier on my body over time. I'm fairly convinced, though, that I'm going to have some sort of carpal tunnel syndrome from this one day if I keep doing this for years. But I might not. but I might. So, we are going to Taipei this week. Today is Tuesday, and we're leaving on Thursday, so in a couple days. So I plan on bringing the GoPro for that too, and like doing some street filming and stuff like that, which is the other thing that I was thinking about. If I create this Patreon page, I might also make it not just about art, but about culture and about my experience abroad, which, you know, is unique, I guess. So maybe that's the best part about it. I wonder sometimes if something's so unique that people can't relate to it, because it's like, oh, everyone else is doing this, and that creates a sort of familiarity, and then the thing that I want to do is like not quite the same, and then people will be like, I don't get it. So but I think my entire life I've approached things to just do things the way I want to do them, and I won't say it always works, but I think that I don't know, I keep thinking of like those competition shows like Project Runway or something like that, where it's like people don't trust their instincts, and then that's usually when they fail, because they're relying too much on other people's, not necessarily on what people tell them to do, but what they think people want to see, which is different. Which I guess brings me back to, if I do this, you know, and I start getting all of this input from outside people, will that affect my work in such a way that it becomes less authentically me? I don't know. I mean, I think that I've always taken into consideration what my audience responds to. This might just be a more explicit way of garnering that input. So really nothing is changing in terms of how I theoretically how I respond to this outward stimuli. I don't know. I might have to edit that out. But yeah, so I guess my hope is I'll be able to take new ideas from people, but I'll still be true to myself. I mean, I've often said that working in a void is not preferable for me. I like having feedback. I like having ideas bounced off of people. I definitely appreciate even things like, oh, that reminds me of a cloud, or what, you know, like personal responses or impressions for my work are always like really entertaining and surprising, and you know, I just appreciate it. It's it goes back to my feeling about art in general, which is that for me, the art that I make, I don't ever want to like imbue meaning on it. I don't want to say this is what this means. I much prefer, or I actually even really think that the meaning is derived more from the viewer, and if it means something to an individual, then that's what it means. I mean, it's creating its own reality in a way. Most of my art is it's about the aesthetic. It's not about the meaning. But the more I work on things, the more I see specific meanings, I guess. You know, in permutations, there are definite themes that I think come back, such as, well, like what I'm doing here, I have a tendency to want to always take these to their nth degree, meaning I want to connect all the points to all the other points. Even when I think when I start a piece, I'm going to be restrained and I'm not going to do like the whole permutation. If it doesn't seem right, and it often doesn't to me, I'll be like, well, I'll just complete the permutation, then it'll be better. And a lot of times it's true, but like my husband, he's always like, he's like, I want to see more where you just do some of it and like leave it incomplete and like sort of raw. Which I want to do that too, but I just always feel like so what I'm getting at is that sometimes it becomes an obsession. It becomes like a compulsion. And I think that's a theme of my work. Whether other people see that or not is, you know, I'm not really sure. I haven't heard anyone comment that. But even when I make a piece that's not like that, that's something that's really minimal, it's still a comment on compulsiveness, because it's just the negation of compulsion, which, you know, it implies the reverse. So, but I mean, I think that looks so much cooler than like that. So how can I not do it? And then, you know, I see something that no one else does in my work, you know? Like, people look at a piece and they're like, oh, that's whatever. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess it is that, but that's not what I see, you know? Oh, so yeah, Taiwan. I'm really looking forward to going to Taiwan. Being here in China has been eye-opening. From a cultural standpoint, I mean, all I'll say is that there's a lot of differences culturally between myself and the Chinese. I won't even say between Americans. I don't really want to, you know, I don't want to make. I mean, I have my own opinions, but I don't really want to make that make. I don't really want to have a discussion about it. I just want to say that like what I'm gonna find interesting about Taipei is that it seems to be a place where China would be now if their government was more open. Actually, I just feel weird talking about it, so maybe I won't. But I'm looking forward to going there. And some really, really good music comes out of Taiwan, which reminds me I want to double check. There's a venue in Taiwan that I want to check out, and hopefully a band will be playing while I'm there, but I don't know, that seems like a lot to ask. There's a band called Elephant Gym that's from Taipei, and of course, now that I'm finally getting there, they're, I think, like currently on tour in the U.S. If they're not currently on tour, they just were. Either way, I won't be able to see them. But I would like to discover more interesting bands that use Chinese as their language, because it'll help me with my study of Mandarin. So something on one of my on a recent piece that I did was I just like went about this far and I stopped, and that was kind of interesting. And I think I could do that too. The cool thing that happens is you start to see, you know, these patterns happening, but they're hints. They're not like the full thing. And again, it's just it's the other recurring theme is like making choices, like making the decision to stop at a certain point, and knowing when that is the right time. Because I'm starting to feel like, oh, this is looking good. Maybe I just need to stop this particular permutation, because we're getting this depth. I almost don't need all this to keep going. Yeah. So going forward, I might, maybe just do like this or something on this one, and I don't know. But I'm going to stop that one for now. Since we're doing it, what I'll do now for this one is another way I sometimes do the permutation is like I'll go from, alright, if we name this 1, and then we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we'll go 1 to 10. And then what I'll do is I'll just go to 2 and 9. And then I just rotate it over and over again. And what that does is it creates a completely different pattern. It's a little bit harder to follow this way. I kind of have to pay a little bit more attention. And especially when there's so many lines on this, I run the risk of like, losing track. But the, you know, what's really freeing about working on a piece like this with so many lines on it is that if I make a mistake, in quotes, a mistake, no one will see it really. uh, or even if they do, it's like, it's character, right? It's like a scar on a cheek or something like that. So what can I do? Like I was just thinking like I'm quiet. How would it make more sense for me to like plan out like a whole um, so so what was I saying? Yeah, I mean, like, should I like if I were to do this, would it be better to like plan ahead and like, okay, like I'm gonna do this project and I'm gonna talk step by step through a project, or is it kind of okay for me to just do stream of consciousness and like, you know, just say whatever's on my mind while I'm working? I mean, that was kind of my vision when I was thinking about this. And I guess going back to my statement about trusting my gut, I mean, wouldn't it make sense to just go with my initial impulse? I'm fairly certain I've lost track here. Which is also kind of a cool thing that can happen. I mean, yet another thing, a recurring theme with my work is that mistakes lead to discoveries. When things don't necessarily go to plan, sometimes I'm like, oh, that's cooler than I could have planned. And there's no way to account or to plan for those things, so it makes them special in a way. And a lot of times I notice these things happening, and so I try and recreate them, or there. So you see that creates this like sort of more defined shape here, but it's not as dense as here, which I like. I might want to do one more. I don't know. So, as you can see, in a piece like this, it's more intuitive. I'm like evaluating as I go, and I'm just responding to what I'm seeing. Whereas on this piece, I have everything planned out ahead of time. I know this part's going to be the white lines on black. I know basically everything that needs to happen. So I work very differently on different pieces. And I don't know that there are many artists that work that way. It's kind of, I don't know if that is a good thing or a bad thing, but it suits my temperament well. I feel like I'm a, you know, I owned a business for 10 years, and I taught myself a lot about accounting and bookkeeping, and it really surprised me, but in a way now it makes sense that I did that, because I have like two very strong sides of me, and I feel like my art is really emblematic of that a lot of times. Not every piece, but in some pieces I actually show it. I show like one side is very tight and contained and thought out, and the other side is a little bit more messy and spontaneous. And I think that maybe that's why my work looks the way it does. So I took the tape off, but I don't think I'm gonna add another wash yet, because I think it's still just a little bit wet. I want to look at this. I think I need to just put a little bit more paint on here. All right. So, if you're familiar with this type of composition, I've done several of these on white paper, and this is the first one on black, and I thought I was just going to do kind of the reverse on the black paper, but I don't think that the black lines on the white is going to have the same kind of impact. So I decided that I'm going to do the full lines permutation inside here, and I think it'll be really cool. So I'm kind of excited to see how that looks, and maybe you know, I'll post that very soon, but I don't think I'm going to work on it again in this video. Yeah, all I was going to do next is maybe some more line work on this. And I said I was going to go for an hour, but it's been about 48 minutes. So I'm going to stop the video now. And I really hope that some people comment and kind of give me some feedback on really anything. Okay, thanks.